So this is Ableton Live. Ableton Live is the backbone of click, MultiTracks, and automation for many bands, churches, and worship leaders. If you are new to Ableton, or even if you've used it for a long time, this could be a very important video for you. I'm going to show you two methods to set up your Ableton timeline. Both are played out very differently, but both methods work really well. Hi everybody, my name is Nathan and welcome to Crazy Amazing Designs. My goal here is to help teams and individuals to do church and event production with excellence. So I am a longtime Ableton Live user and I have found that organization is key. Ableton Live is a DAW, or D-A-W, capable of playback and recording of MultiTracks. I purchase each MultiTrack we use in our services from MultiTracks.com. To organize these, I suggest creating a folder somewhere on your computer. Mine is right here and it is called simply Tracks. This is where I store all of the MultiTrack files that I download as well as Ableton projects that I create. I have folders for each song, then inside of those folders are the songs in the various different keys. So now we're going to go ahead and open up Ableton, and in the file window on the left, we're going to create a link between our Tracks folder on my desktop is where it's located, and our Ableton interface. This is the best way to easily access our Tracks folder from within Ableton Live. Okay, so you see here we got the Tracks folder on the left and then all the files in there. I'm just going to go ahead and remove from sidebar. Great, and now I'm going to hit Add Folder, and now I'm going to go to my desktop, click on Tracks, which is the folder I want to bring in, and there you go. Now if I click on it, you can see it's once again in there, and here's all of my different tracks. So for example, I've got this song open, and here is the file that I downloaded from MultiTracks. So before I go ahead and share the methods I'm going to talk about in this video, I want to explain how each method differs. I want to avoid just sharing the information with you and give you a little bit more background behind Ableton. If you're not familiar with it, this could be a great introduction. If you are familiar with it, you could section. Okay, so the easiest way to use Ableton is to get an 1/8 inch cable to either a dual XLR or 1/4 inch cable. With this, you can send all of your tracks out channel 1 from the computer, and the click and cues you can push out channel 2. However, using the computer's headphone jack to connect to a sound system can be a bit flaky. I suggest at minimum getting an audio interface connected via USB with 2 outputs. I have one, give me just a second. Okay, so I've got an audio interface here. This is a Focusrite interface. So basically, I'm just gonna go ahead and plug it into my little USB adapter and then plug it into my computer. It powers over the USB port, so it'll power up. We're going to go to Ableton Live Preferences. So this is where you would select the headphone jack output, but in my case, I'm going to select the Scarlett. So now it's the same exact thing. It's just 2 composite outputs, so you can do cables from composite to 1/4 inch or XLR. I would do composite to 1/4 inch and then go into 2 DI boxes and then go into your sound system from there. So make sure the outputs are set. And now any of these channels I can go ahead and route to my audio interface, select external out, and select either channel output 1 or 2. So 1 would be 1, 1 would be 2. So send all your tracks to 1 and send your clicking cues to 2. Okay, fun demo. So if you're using Ableton Live or even the playback app to playback tracks for your worship team and you don't have an audio interface with multiple outputs, then you really are missing out. That audio interface is about $100 and it works super well just to give you 2 clean outputs from PurposeCenter. But you can also get audio interfaces that are a lot bigger. You could do one with 10 outputs and then you've got a lot more options, but you're gonna still be limited because you have to go from the output of the interface, which is usually 1/4 inch, to DI boxes, and then XLR out from the DI into the sound system. But there are digital other options such as Dante that we're gonna talk about later, as well as other options like you could use X32. I have a video talking about using X32 as an audio interface. Okay, so the goal of this first method, because the point of this video is we're talking about Ableton and how we've got a couple of different options to choose from to set up our tracks. So the goal of this first method is to move beyond having 1 stereo output channel that all of our tracks are being sent to on the mixer. Method 2 is gonna allow us to send all 32 channels down separate outputs to our front of house console, or even 64 outputs because we're going to be using Dante. So method 1 gives us more flexibility without the complication and extra equipment required to make method 2 work. So in method 1, I'm going to combine our tracks into groups. Then each group will be output through an audio interface to front of house. So you're going to need at least a 9 output audio interface to make the exact setup that I have work. So if you don't have that many outputs, then things could get grouped even more. But I went through and created like my drums, my guitars, my bass, everything, every major grouping has its own output. I'm connecting to an X32 rack in my context, and that has the 32 in, 32 out channel audio interface. So that's how I'm doing this. So to get started, I want to show you the template file that I created called default Ableton project, that each week I duplicate it and rename it for the service that I'm setting up for. So it's in my tracks folder. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it, just copy and paste, and then we'll rename it. That's a good name. Copy the title so that I can go down here and rename the ALS file, because the ALS file is the actual project file. The folder is just a file that Ableton creates to help keep all of the files that are associated with the project inside of the project. So with this project open, you can see that I have 9 groups to break my tracks into. So I've got my clicking cues are separate tracks. I've got my acoustic guitar, I've got my bass, I've got my drums, I've got my electric, I've got my piano, I've got my extra, and I've got my background vocals. I also have a track in here for time code. Nope, I don't seem to have that. But we also have a track for host track and pad. We'll talk about those later on. So these extra channels bring the total to 12 outputs. Those groups are color coded and contain different amounts of tracks because each song has a different number of tracks. So for example, there's one song that has a ton of electric guitar tracks. So I ended up adding a bunch of extra tracks to the template to fit them. And if I expand it, you're like, wow, it's 9 electric guitar tracks, because there's a song with crazy amounts of electric guitar tracks. So to add our first song into the template, I've copied this template, I've renamed it for today. This is no longer the default template. This is the file that we're going to start with for today's gathering. So to add our first song, on the left, we're going to click on the tracks folder, and we're going to navigate to our first song. I'll expand the folder for Firm Foundation, and then I'm going to click on the MultiTracks.als file. And now I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom of my pre-built groups and tracks. And I'm going to drag the ALS file into here on the very bottom. And you can see on the left side, it created a bunch of tracks. So for my second song, I'm going to go ahead and select this song right here, click on the ALS file, and I'm going to drag it below the first song that we drug in. And now I can click on the very top file associated with this song, which is markers, and then I'll go all the way to the bottom, click on the very bottom file, and now I'm going to drag it to the right of the first song. We can drag it out a ways because I can easily delete some time. Cool, so now both files are on the timeline. So I said just to go ahead and drag them in below all of the tracks, but I actually have these 2 tracks called space, space, and they're just black, okay? So the idea is that when we drag all of these tracks up into where they're actually going to go for the gathering, we can delete everything below the space, space channel. So it's going to really help us to see, okay, what exactly is important, what exactly is not. So now we can go ahead and drag all of the tracks from below the space, space tracks up into where they're actually going to go for the presentation for the service. So I've tried a ton of different methods for this. I sometimes minimize these tracks so that I can get to the top ones easier. So now I've highlighted all of these, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it up in here, and we're aligning it to the dead left. And we've got click and cues. Those go right beside each other, so we can drag all of those. We've got acoustic guitar. We've got both basses, so we can drag those together. So drums are next. I need to expand the drums to drag these 3 files into here. Okay, electric's next. I'll have to expand it again. Oh, this song only has 6 electrics. That's still a lot of electric guitars. You're not likely to have 6 electric guitar players on stage, so you're just gonna have to mute the one you want, and you still got plenty of electric guitar tracks. That's funny. Okay, there's that, and the last one. So I'm gonna put these in the synth. Put this in the synth effects in the extra tab, and then I'll put these in the background vocals tab. Cool. So now, again, below the space, space, I can go ahead and delete markers all the way down to where the next tracks come in. So markers is always the top track because I set those up to show me what's going on in the song, because when you drag them into this default project, you don't have any of the markers. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so now we have the second song, and we're gonna do the exact same thing. But on this one, before I do that, I'm gonna right click and add a locator. And once I have this locator, I'm gonna go ahead and type in the name of the song. So now I'll select the first track here. I'm gonna delete these 2 tracks because they're gonna get in my way as we set this stuff up. And now we can drag these up here. Let's go ahead and drag these piano and electric in first. That way we can minimize these. Like I said, I've tried a bunch of different ways. None of them are necessarily faster. Starting at the bottom is a great option because then you can work your way up. And then select everything below space, and delete it. That looks good. Okay, so this is the process that I use for each song. So once the tracks are in their groups, I'm gonna go ahead and delete the channels. We did that were created when the tracks were imported. So that's why I have these 2 blank channels that show me the line where I can delete anything that's below them. So now let's go ahead and make the first song fade into the second song. I'm gonna basically bring them together. So all we need to do is delete the space. So if I just highlight this blank space and go up above the numbers here and right click and delete time, that's all I need to do, but I wanna be a little more strategic than that. So let's go ahead and listen to this. I'm also gonna adjust the time while we're here. Expand this master, and I'm gonna click on the channel. So I've got it set to mixer, and then I've got it set to song tempo. So now this red line, this is gonna allow us to change the song tempo. So we're gonna drag this down to 75. And if this is a new install of Ableton, and when you did that, your tracks all changed, then you need to go into File or Live Preferences, go down to Audio. No, I think it's Record Warp Launch, and you need to Auto Warp Long Samples, shut that off. Okay, cool. So the first one's 75, and the second song is going to be 72, so they're pretty darn close. Okay, so I'll listen to the end of the song.
Ending.
And probably about there is where we want to bring in the next song. I'll probably do it right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the end of these tracks off. And now I'm gonna go to the next song. So probably about right there is where it's starting to get pretty good. So we'll just cut the first bit of the song off. I'm gonna drag the marker all the way back. And now I'm gonna delete some time. So we can just delete this time to get us close. And now we can do some other stuff. Okay, we can drag that cue stick. So delete time. Okay, now I'm gonna go to the top and I'm gonna drag the click over, drag the guide over, and where's that acoustic guitar? It should be right here. I'll expand this to see what's going on, and I'll drag it all the way over. Cool, so now let's listen to the song. Actually, let's bring in so I'm gonna put this at the beginning of where the track and guide track is starting.
2. Intro. 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, that's a good transition. So the next thing I want to look at is in this default project, I have saved this host track and offering pad. These are files that we play to transition from the host into offering after the first 2 songs. So I'm gonna go ahead and I've kind of put these in the default track so that every time I open this up, they're there. So I'm just gonna bring these over and have them start playing as soon as this first song is over. They'll be muted, or not muted, but the tracks will be down, and they're going through a separate output, so it doesn't matter, we just need to start them. This track is 60 minutes in length, so that after the first 2 songs, we can get through hosting, we can get through offering, and then we can get through the entire message, and it's still playing. And then we can bring it up for the invitation after the message, and then into communion. So when it's time to start the 3rd song, the worship leader is gonna hit a button, and then we're gonna go into the song. So then after the last 3 songs, the host pads track is gonna come back. So I'm not gonna do this here, but normally I would set up 3 more songs in this gap here, and then bring the host pads track in at the end of the service so that it's available for hosting and then the out of the service. So that was a lot, okay? So I covered a lot of information about Ableton, about setting up tracks, but I also skipped a lot of stuff, and this is only one method, grouping all of our tracks like this. So I wanna go ahead and go back into some stuff, explain some stuff a little bit deeper, some of the stuff I kind of skimmed over, and then we're gonna go on to the second method. So anytime that I purchase a new track from MultiTracks.com, there are a few steps we need to do to prep the track to be imported into the default timeline and be ready for a gathering on a Sunday. So what that's going to look like is we're going to need to do things like set the beats per minute and warp our tracks together. We're going to do arrange tracks in order. We're going to need to color code our tracks so that we know what category they fit in. We're going to need to create marker tracks to show the location in the tracks so that we know where things like the bridge and the chorus and things are. Once we get transferred into the default project, those markers those locators that we looked at aren't going to be in there. They don't transfer, so we use the markers track to make that happen. And also, we're going to need to create ProPresenter 7 lyric cues. We're going to have a track for that. We're going to create lyric cues inside of Ableton. So let's move on to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new track, this song Shine Like Stars, that has not been set up yet. And we're going to go ahead and set the beats per minute, and we're going to warp the tracks to get it all ready to go. So again, I've navigated to the tracks folder on the left. I've double clicked on the ALS file this time to open the file. I'm not going to click on it and drag it into my projects. I'm going to double click on it to open it. Some things to note is that when we open this project straight from MultiTracks, we're going to see all of these markers, and we're also going to see that the beats per minute has been set. So this song is 78 beats per minute, and we can check that by looking at the name of the file. You can see it's Shine Like Stars, the key of G, and it's 78 beats per minute. It's amazing when that's included in there to help us know what's going on. So there really was a time that the beats per minute wasn't listed in the files, then you had to look on the multitracks.com website, but now they've started including the beats per minute in the file name of the songs. So if you have older files, this might not be there, is why I'm saying that. And just to note, sometimes the different song versions are going to change the beats per minute slightly, so you always want to make sure you rename your file and add that in there if it's not already in there. So once we confirm the song tempo and beats per minute is set, now we can warp the tracks together. So this way, when we import the tracks into a project where the beats per minute is set differently than the song, the length of the tracks won't change. Basically, it won't sound correct, but we're not going to have to rebuild our whole project just to change the beats per minute. It's definitely optimal to do it here. So to do this, make sure it's set at the top left, and now I'm going to double click on my first track. I'm going to shift click on the bottom track, and now I'm going to click warp. And literally that's all it takes, Command S to go ahead and save our project. So our next step, we're going to start grouping these tracks based on colors. We're not going to bring them into our default project yet to actually group them, but we do want to set the color codes. And I have a picture here that I use, so it's on the screen. I have a picture here that I use to set up the songs so that I have all of the proper tracks in the order they're supposed to be in. So I've got a picture on my phone. That way I can go through here and change all of them. So let's check this out. So drums are red. So I'm going to put drums, percussion, and loop. That's probably fine. Loop might go. Let's listen to it. Yeah, that would be better served in the extras tab. So I'm going to bring it down here and change it to yellow. And also change the track to yellow. Okay. Actually, it's not yellow enough. That's the yellow I'm looking for. These ones, while I'm down here, are supposed to be... These ones are supposed to be this beige color. Okay. And this one needs to be brighter, yellow. Okay, so back to the top. Drums and percussion. See how these are different colors? So I'm going to select both of them and change them both to red. Bass. Bass is going to be pink. Right click, pink. I don't know why I can't select multiple of them and change them. Acoustic guitar. Acoustic is the proper blue, but the track for it is not. Oh, there's two acoustics. Whoops. Okay, electric. Electric guitar is the muted yellow. And you're welcome to change these to any colors you would like. Lap steel, I'm going to listen to that one. That's definitely, ooh. It's like an electric. I'm going to throw that in with the electric crew. Okay, cool. So I'm making the decisions here and now so that later when I set up an actual service, I don't have to make the decisions. I can just say, oh, well, clearly this is supposed to be this because it's listed in with the electrics. So piano, I'm guessing strings is going to go somewhere else. I don't know, maybe loop should go in with the guitar, with the drums. I'm going to switch it. Okay, so loop is going to go in with the drums, and I'm going to put strings in with piano. Now I'm going to do strings on the extra channel, because it is a bit different than the piano. Okay, cool. Change this last background vocals. So everything looks good. We've got clicking cued, clicking guides, we've got drums, we've got bass, we've got acoustic guitars, we've got electric guitars, including the lap steel is going to be in there. We've got pianos, we've got the strings, which is the extra channel, and we've got background vocals. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do. Great, so this is pretty straightforward, getting all of the tracks organized based on color so that you know when you go to set it up later. The goal here is that you set this up once and then you never have to touch it again. So do all the work here and now, and then later on you can just bring the files, the tracks into the project. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and create a markers track. So I'm gonna go ahead and right click, insert MIDI track, and I'm gonna go ahead and insert 3 MIDI tracks, and I'm gonna highlight all of them and change their color to this one. And now I'll just drag them all to the top. We're only gonna use one for now. Okay, right click on this one and we're going to rename it to markers. The second one is going to be ProPresenter because I genuinely never used the second one, so I don't even know why I have it in there still. Great, so now we're going to create a markers track. The markers track has been created. The purpose of this markers track is to keep the song labels when it gets moved into the project with multiple songs. In the project included from MultiTracks.com, there are locators, as you can see, that tell us where all of the different song pieces are, the bridges, the choruses, all this stuff. And this is great because we can click on them and we can jump there, but we can also see what's going on in the arrangement of the song. But when we transfer this, when we open this up in the default project or any other way you set up your timeline, these do not transfer to those projects. So we need a way to transfer the information without having to set it up on the other end. So this is kind of where the markers track comes in and why it's a really great way that I have found to keep songs labeled. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on one end of the track, and then I'm gonna click all the way to the other side. I'm gonna right click, I'm going to insert MIDI clips, and now I'm gonna go to the very beginning and I'm gonna start splitting the clips apart. So Command E is how you do it on Mac, and it should be very similar on PC. So I'm just gonna click and drag up. And I'm going to do this for all of these clips because I want to split this into every single time there is a break, an intro, a tag, a chorus. Okay, so now they're all broken up. So now you can literally go through and rename them. So just Command R to rename intro on the first one, intro on the second one. You can zoom out a little bit. Intro on the third one, vamp on the next one, intro on the next one. If you have a lot of similar things, I like to Command C to copy and then paste. Now the next step in the process is to set up the lyric slide automation to control ProPresenter 7 slides from Ableton. I've done this in another video, so I'm not going to do it here, but go check that out. So on Sundays, I plug in the X32 rack to the Ableton machine. I select X USB as my audio interface, and I begin to select my outputs. And you're going to notice that each group has a number associated with it. So I'm going to go back to my default project for this. So here's all my groupings that we drug everything into. So you can see that 19 is the host track, 16 is pad, 17 is click, 18 is guide, etc., with 9 being acoustic guitar. So this clearly shows me the output that each group should be sent to, should be assigned to. Then at front of house, we receive audio in the same channel every single time. That was method 1. Now for method 2. Which has its pros and has its cons. I recommend combining some of method 1 and 2 to create your own style for setting up MultiTrack and Ableton live sessions. So the beauty is that that wasn't a waste, right? All of that we just talked about in option 1 and method 1, that mostly applies to method 2. Method 2 just changes how we output audio from Ableton to our mixing, our audio system. Okay, so to set up method 2, I'm just gonna go and create a new live set I'm gonna go ahead and not save this. And I'm gonna go back to the timeline view, arrangement view, and now I'm gonna go to my MultiTrack. I'm gonna delete all but one of the tracks that are in here. I'm going to go to my first song. I'm gonna drag the ALS file into the project, and now I'm gonna go ahead and drag my second file into the project. Oh, gotta go to the bottom. Okay, so there's my second one. And now I'm gonna minimize all of this. I know, right? This is looking very similar. So we'll go ahead and delete these two tracks just like I did earlier. And now I'm gonna select all the tracks from the second song. And I'm gonna go ahead and drag them over to here. And now we can go ahead and make a locator. Great. So here's my tracks, and we can do the same thing to bring them together. Whoops. Go ahead and delete time. Great. We can also go through and adjust our tempo, beats per minute. See how it's not listed here? If that happens to you, go to click on this little button here, and then it'll show up. So it was 75. Oh no, that's not the right one. Go to song tempo. It was 75, I believe. Okay, so there we go. That is set on that, so now they should sound good. So method 2 is the process developed by myself, my friend Matt, and my friend Justin at the Vineyard Church in Wheeling. So there they use Dante to send most of the Ableton audio channels to front of house to where the mixing console is located. Instead of having a pre-built Ableton project with group tracks, Dante allows 64 channels to be sent to front of house. Then the Yamaha QL5 console has 64 inputs in the console. So every track is basically sent from Ableton to front of house separately. So to do this method, we still want to open the Ableton project for each song and set up lyric cues and markers, but you don't really need to worry about grouping tracks in color. It is still nice to know what tracks are associated with what instruments though. Then just create a new project, drag the first song in, then drag the second song in below the first. Instead of dragging the tracks into pre-built groups, we're going to keep our tracks staggered in the timeline. Now for each track, we're gonna set up the outputs a little different. This process of setting up the outputs does take a little longer, but this is a good method. So I have this Ethernet cable with a converter, and I'm gonna go ahead and plug it into my computer, and this is giving me a network connection to the Dante network, so I'm gonna hit allow. So now I've got the Dante virtual sound card little application open. I'm gonna change it to 64. We don't need 64, let's just do 32 inputs and 32 outputs. Lower the milliseconds, connect to the network, click start. So now we're gonna have a connection to Dante. Okay, so now we're gonna go to live preferences, and I'm gonna go to audio, and I'm gonna select my output as the Dante virtual sound card. Now be sure to select output, and then select all of the channels that you want to be able to push audio to. Whatever you select here is what's gonna come up on your individual channels when you go to assign them. So this channel, this is the input to the channel. This is the output. So I'm gonna change it to external out. And now I have access to 32 outputs. So this is something that's gonna take some coordination between the Ableton machine and the front of house console or the audio network. You're gonna have to figure out what channels you wanna send audio to from Ableton. And if you don't have a bunch of open channels at front of house, this might not be the best method for you. If method 2 works for you, if using Dante from Ableton works for you and not grouping channels, I wanna be clear about this. What I'm doing here is I've got multiple songs in the timeline staggered like stairs, okay? On the first song, we've got our click track channel, and I'm gonna select, go to external output, and I'm gonna select, let's say 10 for my click. Now I'm gonna go to my second song, expand the click track channel, go to my output, change it to external out, and then I'm gonna change it to 10. So for every song, you're gonna have a click, you're gonna have a cues, you're gonna have all your instruments, you're gonna have to go through and set everything in advance. So you can kind of see the advantage of dragging them up into predetermined groupings and then having those easily assignable outputs. But this gives you a lot more control. So I don't know. I like this method when using Dante. It's more annoying to set up. There's a lot of give and take when it comes time to this stuff. So hey, thank you for watching this video and supporting me as I endeavor to help churches do production with excellence. If you'd like to learn more about the training and other consulting options I have available, check out my website, crazyamazingdesigns.com. Don't forget to subscribe for new videos, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.